A legal settlement was recently announced over the alleged use of excessive force by the MBTA Transit Police. The incident prompting the lawsuit that was settled took place at Dudley Station in 2014. The suit was filed by a Roxbury resident represented by the American Civil Liberties Union of Massachusetts. One of the officers involved has already been fired, and she currently faces charges. But the case also raises concerns about training, oversight, and accountability. To explain is our guest from the ACLU, staff attorney Carl Williams. Thank you very much for being with us, Carl.
Thanks for having me.
The lawsuit was filed by the Roxbury resident Mary Holmes, and something happened to her, and she was responding to something going on between the police and another woman at the same station.
That's right. So at Dudley, the bus station there, she walked up and saw two MBTA police officers having some interaction, which to Mary Holmes looked like a kind of an aggressive interaction. They were shaking the woman, pushed her down onto a bench. And what Miss Holmes initially said was actually to the woman, and she said, the quote was, "You better just do what they say, Ma." She called her Ma, sort of nickname. And in that, it was actually facilitating what the police were doing, saying, you know, maybe this could just go a little bit easier. And when one of the police officers, Jennifer Garvey, turned to Mary Holmes and said, "What's this to you? Do you know this person?" And then that started a very aggressive encounter on behalf of Jennifer Garvey. The police officer started getting physical, started pushing Mary Holmes, pepper sprayed her, hit her with a metal baton, and then arrested her and charged her with crimes.
And somewhere along the way, I understand Mary Holmes was dialing 911 to report the officers to the Boston police.
Right. Well, she said she didn't actually wasn't. She just said, "I'm going to dial 911," not knowing who would come in, but said, what you're doing is wrong. And one of the things that we've always pointed to, and Mary has spoken about, is there are these signs. Right. Actually, I was in South Station the other day, and they have audio announcements. It says, "If you see something, say something," and it actually says dial 911. Mary was following instructions. She was doing what the MBTA had actually, had signs and told her to do. And for that, she was criminally charged with resisting arrest, assault battery on a police officer, disturbing the peace, disorderly conduct. And it took us a number of months to sort of right that wrong. And she was vindicated there. Those charges were dismissed, and then we filed, on Mary's behalf, we filed a civil rights lawsuit.
And part of your evidence, of course, there was surveillance video cameras showing a lot of it, and showing her when she's on the ground almost. They're trying to subdue her, I think.
Yeah.
Talk about what happened when she did the conventional thing. Maybe she filed a complaint, and I guess the officers were exonerated.
So she had filed an internal affairs complaint, which was difficult for her to do. She had to actually go to the same police station, which, after she had been pepper sprayed and, beaten and arrested, that was quite a traumatic experience for her. But she had to go back to that same police station and file an internal affairs complaint, which you can imagine would be, a lot to first deal with that interaction, and then to have the, the tenacity, the bravery to go into that same place, thinking you might confront the person who abused you, the people who abused you. She did that, and then she received a letter sometime later which said, nothing wrong happened here.
This is BNN News, and we're talking with Carl Williams from the ACLU of Massachusetts. So the officers are exonerated, and then Mary says, "No, I'm not going to just settle for that."
Yeah, and she made a number of calls, ultimately talking to my colleague Rasan Hall, our Director of Racial Justice, and to myself, and we met with her and said, this is not something that should happen, right? If it's allowed to happen this way, right? There are multiple video cameras. People can see that video footage of Mary being beaten, and that's allowed to happen. I think it sets a bad precedent. People in our communities think, well, that's just what happens. Sometimes you get beat up by the police. And I think if, officers like former Officer Garvey are allowed to do that, it also sends a message to them. Hey, you have a problem? Club somebody, pepper spray somebody, threaten somebody. But we said that can't be allowed to happen. So we wanted to support Mary in terms of that lawsuit.
This is an officer who has gotten fired. Now, was that because of Mary's persistence, or did some other things enter into the picture?
She was actually, she had two charges, sets of criminal charges in relation to domestic violence. She's married to an MBTA police officer, and there was an incident at Foxborough Stadium, and there was an incident at their home. And both of those were reported. It's my understanding that both of those sets of charges were dismissed. But in the course of that, and my understanding of the termination was related to those incidences.
Of course, what you also were trying to address in this settlement is not just the behavior of one officer, it's just the process, the oversight. So what has changed?
So one of the things that Mary, very first thing that she knew it was wrong when she went there. When the process in which she had to go through to file an internal affairs complaint. It's the 21st century, right? 2017. It should be easier to file a complaint than physically dragging yourself down to the MBTA police station, which is in this kind of inaccessible place, not really near any T-stop, ironically. And that is something, Mary wanted that to happen. Now, today, if you go on the MBTA's website, there's a place online. You can fill out online and say, this thing happened, it was bad, here's the reason why, here's my name, here's my information, and you get a receipt that says, yes, you did file a complaint on this date at this time. So that's one of the things that changes. Another thing is there's a review process of internal affairs complaints where the superintendent is involved, the superintendent of the MBTA police is involved in that certain pieces of that will be reviewed at certain levels that are sort of mandated in the rules. Also, a number of the MBTA policies and procedures that are related to folks like you and me, like regular folks, are now posted on the MBTA's website. So if you think something wrong happened to you and you're not sure if it violates Rule 15 or 73 or what it is, you can actually look online and say, oh, conduct unbecoming of an officer, or not respectful treatment, or a use of force violation. Those are things that you can have a lot more information on by finding them online.
Of course, I also wonder about the training, because there are these situations, yes, sometimes police have to deal with bad people, sometimes there are good people, and sometimes there are people in between who a police officer might think are getting in the way.
Sure.
So what about training to deal with those things?
So that there's the MBTA police have a MOAB training. So when people have questions of use of force and they say, maybe this officer used too much force, it's hard for us to know. Maybe there's not video, because there isn't always video. But there's a certain series of steps that can trigger a person being brought back in, and not saying you're the worst officer in the world, we're going to fire you, saying we're going to bring you in for this aggressive behavior, for management of aggressive behavior training, to say you should know more about it. And that's the MBTA Police Department's responsibility to educate its officers in saying, here's maybe the best way to diffuse a situation. Here's a situation where you should not use force, and maybe here is a situation where you should, where you're justified in using force.
We should finally mention, maybe not everybody should have to worry about doing this, but there might come an occasion down the line, someone has a question, they want to call the ACLU. What's the best way for them to do that?
You can call us at our offices downtown Boston, 617-482-7130. You can also contact us online. If it's about the details of it, we'd prefer if you called us, because we'd like to talk to you about those specifics. But if people have concerns, if people have questions, they can definitely find us online, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. They can find us on our website, aclum.org, or you can certainly call us.
Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you.
Carl Williams from the ACLU, Massachusetts.